The topic is digital innovation and jewelry. I'm always a fan of wearables. Of course, my wearable tells me that I don't sleep enough. So, and not wearing jewelry, I'm not sure that, maybe that's the same kind of thing that this is going to teach us, but I'm really looking forward to hearing about this. This will be a Pacha Kucha style presentation where we'll look at how 5 designers are merging tech and their craft. Each presenter will have 20 slides speaking for 20 seconds on each, which is going to be exciting to coordinate that from a technical perspective for 4 people back to back, and I'm looking forward to that as well. And to lead those talks, we have someone by the name of Wing-Kei Chan. Wing-Kei is a Toronto studio jewelry designer and maker. She started her design education in Hong Kong, graduated from the University of Texas at Austin in 1994, and NSCAD University in Halifax, Nova Scotia in 96. Wing-Kei discovered her passion for teaching during her graduate studies, and she joined jewelry studies at George Brown College as a full-time prof in 1997 and coordinated the program from 2008 to 2014. She's been developing and teaching digital technology to the jewelry program since 2003, and her work emphasizes exercise economy while using precious metals, finding a balance between traditional jewelry techniques and using non-traditional materials and digital technology as a sensibility to relationships between object, body, and environment. Join me in welcoming Wing-Kei to the stage. Round of applause.
Hi, everyone. How are you? Jewelry has been viewed almost always as a craft that is heavily based on traditional techniques. And these techniques take years and years of training, hands-on training. And some of these techniques might include precious metal fabrication, wax carving, models for casting, and gem settings, for instance. However, in recent years, advancement in technologies, particularly in 3D printing, 3D modeling, and CAD, computer-aided design, have completely kind of changed and disrupted the jewelry design and making process. So today this panel is going to look at how the industry is thriving with these new technologies, very rapidly changing technologies, and how jewelry education is changing, modifying to catch up. So I'd like to introduce you to our 4 panelists. Korinna Azreiq, Valerie Lamiel, Lina Maria Avendano, and Paul McClure, please come on stage. Welcome. And I'm going to give a brief introduction to each of our panelists. Please have a seat. I can sit anywhere. Very good. So Korinna graduated from the Jewelry Arts program in 2008 with honors. She was born in Russia and is the designer behind Korinna label. Prior to discovering 3D printing, 3D modeling, her work is based primarily on precious metal and gemstones and using traditional casting methods. And the discovering of CAD has completely changed your design and material choice for jewelry making. And in 2015, Korinna founded her company, Korinna, which is a jewelry label that blends elements of contemporary and traditional design. And since 2018, since last year, Korinna has been on board at the GBC Jewelry Studies, teaching various courses, including a 3D modeling. Valerie Lamiel is also a George Brown grad 2 years ago, and Valerie is a Toronto designer and goldsmith focusing on jewelry and objects for small run productions. She's currently a designer in residence back at George Brown College, and one of her roles is tutoring students on 3D modeling. Lina Maria Avendano Lina was born in Colombia, and her passion for art, literature, and design, and her love for beauty and functionality was very much inspired by her grandmother, who was a Spanish literature professor with a great passion for painted porcelain. In 2004, she studied industrial design at Pontificia Bolivariana University. Did I get it right?
Yeah, you get it.
And a place where she discovered the magic of jewelry. In 2015, Lina graduated from the George Brown College Jewelry Arts program. And since 2018, she has been a studio technician for digital technologies. Paul McClure is a Canadian artist and designer of contemporary jewelry. His work is represented in private and public collections, including Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, Canadian Museum of History, Design Museum of Barcelona, and National Museum of Scotland. He graduated from NSCAT University in Halifax with his BFA in 1989, Escola Massana, Barcelona, Spain in 1990, and an MA in 1999 from the National College of Art and Design, Dublin, Ireland. He exhibits and lectures throughout North America, Europe, and Asia. And additional to maintaining a studio practice, Paul is also an educator, writer, curator, and community arts event organizer. Since the year of 2000, he's been a full-time professor at the Jewelry Studies at George Brown College and has been coordinating the program since 2014. Paul has received the Sadie Brofman Award, a Governor General's Award, which is Canada's formal distinction for excellence in visual arts. And next, we're going to have as Matt mentioned, we're going to have a brief presentation from each of our panelists about their work and their practice, and then we'll start our panel discussion. Okay, first up would be Korinna. Paul?
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Are we going to be able to see on that screen those? Okay. I was going to say we'll sit there.
Now, there was a slight misunderstanding about the slide advancement. Yeah, we good? Oh, okay, we're good now. If needed, someone can use this clicker. Okay. Korinna.
Okay, I will start. My name is Korinna Azreiq, and I'm really honored to be here today and share my story. So the first image represents my work. It's not my work, I just borrowed it from internet, but it just shows how little I knew before I started my studies at George Brown in the jewelry art program. And as a third-year student, I was already capable to fabricate pieces like this. So the piece on the left, on your left, yes, those are the fully hand-fabricated earrings. And because it's so difficult to achieve perfect symmetry, I would use a trick and make it asymmetrical. The ring on the right is actually my first attempt of CAD. Now, those two pieces are my jewelry after I graduated school, and I had to outsource CAD designers. Why? Because I didn't have access to the software and to the equipment, and it was very challenging to communicate with people who were making it for me, because it wouldn't be quite what I imagined in my head. Now, as the time passed by, I came across those images, and this is work of Eric Stewart, an American jewelry designer, and his work blew my mind. Why? Because I couldn't explain to myself how those pieces are made. And I knew that it's not ArtCam, the program I learned, and I definitely knew it's not hand-fabricated. Now, other two designers also were the turning point in my life when I saw those images, and I was completely blown away by work of Stefania Lucetta, an Italian jewelry designer. She's a pioneer of 3D printing and 3D prototyping, and Jasmine Watson is a New Zealandian designer. Now, after my research, I found out that the software they were using is a Rhinoceros. It's a very powerful 3D modeling software used by architects and designers, and also product designers and engineers. And this program was adopted by jewelry industry because of its precision. Now, those are my very first attempts to create my own designs in the software using Rhinoceros. And it took me quite a while of a time before I have courage to actually bring something into the physical world, because it's quite expensive making things in gold. Now this is, as a further I would develop a little bit more of a skill, I was able to incorporate multiple gemstones in my jewelry and create more challenging casting-wise pieces. And it was very satisfying because I was able actually to have full control of a process. Now, as the time passed by, I had a baby, and suddenly I had no access to the studio. I couldn't make anything by hands, and I was looking for a solution. And if first year I was completely fine with that, I was consumed by the role of being mother. Then I found a solution, what I can do from home, and there is a company, a great company, where I could just upload my file, and 2 weeks later get 3D prints at my home without actually using any jewelry tools. Now, back then, a few years ago when I started using this company, they were offering over 20 materials for printing. And one material I just decided to give it a try was nylon, because it was relatively inexpensive. So I thought I will give it a try because I never experienced it. And I was blown away by its physical quality. Why? Because it's super light, porous, and I was able to create things which I would never be able to make through casting in metal. So I was able to create those shapes, as you can see, interlocked, one sphere inside another one, and very voluminous hollow shapes. Now, because of the physical properties of the material, I am very limited on the type of the jewelry I could create. So the other thing I could make were pins, and the colors you see have nothing actually to do with the digital world. I would deep dye it, and that's allowed me to give it a little bit of a one-of-a-kind quality to each piece, because as you can see, they are identical to each other except the color. And this, I was use fabric dyes, and that's allowed me to make it each piece unique, because I would deep dye it and I would use, it's completely hand dyeing. So now after a while, I could go back to the studio, and I could go back to the material I'm very comfortable with, is metal. And I could actually create now much more complicated shapes and forms. And as you could see through the multiple of the images, I always was fascinated with the color. And metal is much more difficult to work with and achieve different color, but because I was able again to build it in the computer, I was able to create different topography and actually achieve different colors. So all of the pieces you can see on the screen are actually sterling silver, but because I would use different metal finishing techniques and gold plating, I could actually make them each piece individual and different from each other, and it was very satisfying. Now, I have to say a few words on other 3D modeling softwares available on the market. And one is a Fusion 360. It's a cloud-based software. Another one, Blender, is a very powerful software as well. And the most important about this software, it's offered for free. Now, two other softwares, 3D Code and ZBrush, those two softwares can actually do something which Rhinoceros can't. They can create organic shapes, human faces, animals, and as you can see, very intricate jewelry pieces. This jewelry piece is made by Thomas Wittelbach. He's a legendary in the ZBrush community. Now, those images are my very last projects, and the one on the top left is a ring, and I'm trying to incorporate my skills with enameling, which I never did before. So I'm really hoping to be successful there. And so I have many projects on the go. And it looks like I have to wrap up. The time passed by so fast. So thank you.
Thank you, Korinna. Valerie, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie Lamiel. I'm a designer and goldsmith, and in 2018, I graduated from the George Brown Jewelry Arts program. And this past academic year, I've returned as a designer in residence, assisting in the Rhino classroom and Rhino labs, actually assisting Korinna in her classes. So just a bit about me. I was born in the Philippines and raised on the west coast of BC. So naturally, the beach is my happy place, and it's a constant source of inspiration when I'm creating and designing my jewelry. So I'm just going to show you a few pieces of my work and how I use digital technology in creating some of my pieces. So as a student in the George Brown program, I was really engaged and eager to learn everything I could about traditional goldsmithing and hand fabricating techniques. And this is me pouring my very first cuttlefish casting, and the final finished product is on the right. And what I love about making jewelry is really the tactile and handmade aspect of the practice. And there's also a sense of pride in creating something entirely by hand and without any digital assistance at first. But as I progressed in the program and my designs got a little bit more complex, and maybe I was trying to meet certain deadlines or wanted to make a uniform and consistent form, I really embraced any digital assistance that I could get, especially when creating the final thesis work in the last year of the program. So for example, a hand-fabricated gold ring that you see here is entirely made by hand, but I was not able to achieve a specific pattern that I was referencing. So I used a digital file to create that texture and then etch it onto the metal and to achieve that texture. And to me, the digital aspect of a jewelry practice isn't just to make things quicker. It also opens up a lot of possibility for experimentation, playing around with alternative materials rather than just the precious metals that we're always used to in this field. So these are just some fun laser cut acrylic earrings that I've produced. And in my practice in particular, I use the digital assistance in prototyping and helping me to achieve my final design, maybe a little bit quicker and a little bit more precise, and have a lot of control in that process. So those were prototypes to this eventual product, which were made using a laser cut matrix die. So the outline of the earrings will always be uniform, always be the same, but the finishing and the texture is all applied by hand, and I've created a handmade piece of jewelry in the end. And I continued using this technique to create these custom bridal earrings for a client. And again, with that control of the digital technology, I'm able to work with my client to give her exactly what she wanted for her big day. And in the summer of 2017, before my final year of the program, I was selected to go on an internship in Sicily, Italy, where I was placed in a small jewelry studio that was run by all women. It was a wonderful, enriching experience, but really this is where things kind of clicked for me, and I really understood the real-life application of the technology in a jewelry studio. So this small studio in a very small town was able to produce everything in-house and not have to outsource any part of their process, thanks in large part to their in-house 3D printer, which I happily used, of course. And when I returned from that internship, I came back with a lot of confidence and just comfort in using the Rhino software, in being able to take on custom work and custom clients, and again, being able to deliver exactly what they want for such a big investment. And for me, I also use the software to assist myself in the later stages of the production, such as gem setting, which is typically outsourced by most jewelers. But for me, because I have so much control in modeling my piece, I'm comfortable with setting all of my stones myself, such as this, these eternity bands that I'm planning to produce. This technology also allows me to partner with companies and create branded products for them, and it also allows me to have a very predictable estimated delivery time, so I can deliver what they need. And I also work with visual artists in fabricating components of their installations. This is a Canadian artist whose work you see here is up in Taipei at the moment, and I created the hardware of his flags. And although I didn't 3D print these items, I hand fabricated them, I still used the software in communicating with the client to give him exactly the dimensions that he wants. And same goes when I'm working with fashion designers. I'm currently working with a young designer in creating the gold components of her earrings. And visually, the software also lets me render and give her a visual of what the final product will be. And these are all handmade by artisans in Brazil. And I've produced and fabricated the gold components that go with them. And aside from jewelry, I'm also trying to broaden my practice in not just wearable items, but also small objects. And this is a recent piece I made that's a reversible candle holder slash dish or container. And I have plans to produce this in different colorways and different colored acrylics and pearls. My most recent work is available actually right now at the Tiff Bell Lightbox gift shop as part of the year-end graduation exhibit of all of the jewelry students graduating this year. So you can go and check that out until May 5th. And I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Lina. Lina Maria Avendano. I am actually the jewelry digital technician at George Brown College. Today we are talking about digital innovation and jewelry, as my partners start to say and present their work. Many people ask me why did I focus my studies in jewelry as an industrial designer. Well, for me, jewelry is the development of industrial design in small scales. It challenges the exploration of new materials and technologies. It's actually highly connected with ergonomic cost, talk with the customers, and also is a form to create a new product, the challenge that the industrial designs have daily. For me, design has these four elements that is important for no matter what is the design. Functionality, where, how, why. Morphology, that is the shape, the form, and ergonomics, body, piece. And production, materials, process, and equipment. For these, in these images, we can see the inspiration that is a poppy, and then we start to collect the shape and clarify and clean the form to produce the shape. In this image, you can see how actually my work for these past of years is inspired by the morphology of the nature. That is most of the time by the demonstration of my work. Also, you can see in these colorful in materials. So this piece, it was my first piece that I make for as a technology piece. It was made by laser cut and 3D print in different materials. I use plastics and I use metals. To try to achieve the lower cost for these pieces, I changed kind of materials as acrylic, because laser cut in metal is a little bit high cost. And also, I use a 3D print in cast that I also, after it was casting by the house. After these, as you can see in this image, I start to explore a little bit of the shapes of the wings of the butterflies. The first image, you can see that it was a handmade piece. Then it was the product from the laser card company. To achieve this form, I use emery paper because it's not absolutely done for the laser cut companies. And after that, I start to use a different kind of shapes. And then I use the rotation and I start to be in a strategic form for to try to achieve a different kind of shapes. So, oh my God. So you can see here in the design that is, I use a rotation and I use a different kind of colors that I only did with a scale the same design and I add a texture that it was a lines, that it was cutted. For my last pieces that I designed as a artist in resident at George Brown College, it was a very difficult piece to make because I understand that the part of the ergonomic, it have to be a custom made. I start to explore forms and shapes and try to use my partners and my coworkers as my customers to try to see if the piece was comfortable and it was ergonomic for the part to to sustain or support the aircraft in the air. I use the same shape. The only part that I create differently, it was the supports on the ear. From this part, I understand that the materials is a challenge sometimes. The thickness, depends on the design that you want to do, you need to understand what is how the materials is actually affected. Now that I am in George Brown and this technology is available for us to attack the 2 3D printers that we have right now, the 4 3D printers, 2 for lamps and 2 Minecraft. I start to experimentate different kind of softwares and different kind of materials. And also, so the students right now, they are using Rhino and Adobe Illustrator to materialize their designs. So what my work is to try to understand and achieve what is the goals in the designs, analyze what is the difficult and critic points to 3D print or to cut their designs. So for Minecraft, we have this software that you can see there. And for the Rhino, we have another kind of software from Chafeway and for Labs. And for to attack, we are using Rhino and Illustrator. So for each technology, we have a different materials that I have been difficult for the environment. Sometimes different material, it's oh my God. The material is actually each material it needs to each material works in different form, depending on many kind of elements that is going around, how actually they dry, how actually it's cured, which is the material, heat, and the shapes, how actually the shapes is affected, the 3D print, and how analyzed can be or use a different kind of angles. So for me, this year, I have been a challenge working now as a part of the jewelry technician, because I have to analyze most of the time and prove that the materials is gonna work for the design. So for the students, I think is the best way is to understand how each machine is working, plus how the materials are, it's gonna work for each kind of design. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lina. Thank you.
Stand up. Hi, everyone. My name is Paul McClure, and I'm the professor and program coordinator at George Brown. And I've split my presentation into two components. The first to talk a little bit about our program, the first half, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about my own practice. So here you see our jewelry studios, and we teach traditional goldsmithing skills. That's our history. But we also teach digital technology. So we have the classroom, and then we have the lab. And digital technology for jewelry has been around for a while, mostly in the model making side of the business. So we teach hand carving that you see here, but we also teach the production of models through technology. And you see sort of the process here. So a ring is designed in the software, then it's 3D printed up top, and you get a castable wax model, which then has to be, a lot of handwork has to be applied to it. It's not a magic tool that you can just create a piece of jewelry. There's stone setting, there's finishing, and a lot of really fine skills. I'm going to show you a little bit about our senior students' work, who work both in traditional skills that you see on the left and some digital technology. So we have a production project where we get students to work with 3D printing, such as this piece on the right, which fits into the whole sort of aesthetic of the collection. But this one is printed in laser sintered nylon, and then there's some handwork added to it with the hand-set pebble in the bottom right-hand corner. The laser cutter, which Lina brought up already, is another tool that we use. And the issue with this tool is that everything's two-dimensional design, everything's flat. And so the challenge here is to create designs, create jewelry that isn't necessarily flat. Another advantage to it is that you can work in separate alternative materials like textiles and wood and acrylic. These pins on the right, for example, are done in acrylic. The pieces on the left, of course, are fine goldsmithing. But the ones on the right also take advantage of pattern making, which digital technology is really fantastic for, the laser cutter in particular. This piece, which I'm wearing now on my lapel, is an example, Agnes's work, which deals with themes of computerization. She's one person who was able to kind of overcome that flatness of laser technology and use the laser to create modules and build up 3D form. Now, a third area that digital technology influences jewelry at the moment is wearables, wearable technology. And we've just really dabbled in this a little bit through a couple of applied research projects. This one here is a Triada life bracelet, which was a project for Alzheimer's patients. Now that the technology is getting small enough, the electronics, we are starting to have ways of using it. And actually, I'm going to be going off to KIA, Copenhagen School of Technology, where they have a particular wearables lab tied to their jewelry department to find ways that we can link these two together. On to my work. These things go fast. My work is about the body. It's about the body, the content, but it's also for the body. So I'm going back a little bit here to show you how the body is this important part in my work. First off with the X-rays that you saw there, and then I moved into sort of digital imaging, particularly visual images of the body and microbiology, microcells in these enhanced electromicrographs of chromosomes up on the top and then cells at the bottom, and the pins that are used for those or that are inspired by those. Then I was looking sort of at how the body is digitized in our contemporary world. And these rings come from having clients' DNA sequenced, receiving these numbers that you see on the left, and then creating a pattern that's wrapped around the wedding bands. And this too also comes from chromosomes. I had my own DNA sequenced and created this sort of metal sketch that you see up in the top left, and then used that with the help of Lina to create some of these big chromosome neck pieces. in 23 pairs, like the chromosomes. Antibodies is another muse. The image you see of the antibodies here, and these rings take the form of the antibody. It's kind of like amuletic jewelry, right? Antibodies are in us to protect us and fight for us in our immune system. And these rings were the first pieces where I really started to look into how to use additive manufacturing, not just casting. So the pieces in the middle are dyed laser sintered nylon, and the pieces on the left are laser sintered steel. The problem with those is the surface of them, the resolution and the surface of additive manufacturing is very weak still. It's not a nice texture. These pieces went back to the nylon and kind of used them in a combination with hand skills, just as with these pieces as well. Trying to figure out ways of putting together the material in a way that's permanent. Unfortunately, my conclusion to date is that it's not very permanent. It's a difficult material. It's not stable. But luckily, we have on the way, finally, we have additive manufacturing using gold and silver powders so that we can start to print in these precious metals. Birmingham City University is the first educational institution to have one of these machines on loan from Cookson, who produces the technology. And here's a little video. It's kind of like additive manufacturing porn video. So direct metal laser sintering, as I said, is a 3D printed technology that takes the design file and slices it into very thin layers. The technology then rebuilds the item, layer by layer, by passing its laser beam across a thin sheet of fine gold powder and melting it into the required profile. A fresh layer of gold powder is then spread again, and the process repeats itself until the item is printed, which you'll see here. The ability to design and produce really geometrically complex and even ultra lightweight designs, whilst potentially removing time-consuming steps in the production process, cutting out the need for tooling, cutting out the need for molds, and minimizing waste, means that the 3D printing technology now can transform sectors of the jewelry industry, and we'll see how this is going to play out. Currently, a machine like this is about $4 million, but you know, it'll come down fast enough. So that's where we're at on the technology, and looking forward to exploring that machine myself in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Okay, so one of the questions that I was going to ask you is how digital technology, 3D modeling, 3D prototyping, and CAD has shaped your practice, professional practice in recent years. And as if you got the memo, everyone already actually talked about that in the presentation. And if is there anything else you want to add to that?
I would like to say a couple words. Me, as a one-person company, I have now my company, Korinna, right? It's allowed me to actually create a full collection and just being able to offer something to the stores and at the shows and just not outsourcing anybody, but by just using that technology. And it's amazing because now I can actually plan ahead and it gives me certain timeline, which makes it very comfortable to run business like that on your own.
Right. So it's a great advantage for small entrepreneurs, business owners.
Yes, especially companies like Shapeways, right?
Right.
They make it possible.
Yeah, and jewelers are very comfortable running small businesses.
Yes.
In general.
Yes. Well, it's because we don't have choice.
If we can move on, I'd like to ask you, because you've all involved in jewelry education in various capacity, right? So what kind of challenges or opportunities are you, or advantages you seeing in having digital technology in education, particularly in jewelry education?
I can start there.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's very interesting where we are at this point is a lot of our students come to the college, come to our programs because they want to make things with their hands. That's the majority. They're actually not, or they're even turning away from the digital because they really want to produce with their hands. And we're at this place where we have to, it's imperative that some digital skills are acquired because that really is the future of the industry. So getting this balance, I think, is a challenge. Convincing students or training students that they need to spend the time to learn software, which can be really quite demanding and quite, the learning curve can be quite high, quite long. Because until you have those software skills, you can't get to the making.
Or designing.
Or designing. But it's the making that I think a lot of the classic creative maker wants to go into this area because they want to make. They do also design, of course, but getting to the making part of digital takes quite a long time. And once you get there, once you're able to design and create a model, then you actually start playing with the machines and getting some actual physical product in your hands, which then, of course, as I was saying, sort of needs a little bit of finishing, needs quite a bit of hand fabrication afterwards. But that's the crux of like getting us to the place where students are comfortable with the digital to design to get them to the making is one challenge.
Just to add to that, just because I'm right now, in the past year, I was assisting in the Rhino tutorials and seeing and hearing the students and their reaction to the software firsthand. There is that initial challenge because they're so used to working in the physical space that it's hard for them to navigate the digital space. But after they overcome that initial block, I see a lot of them, I guess, embracing it. Maybe they learn how they can render their assignments a little bit quicker using the software. And I think I see that as a positive in the end.
I think sometimes more than the challenge is an opportunity to improve designs. Like it's in terms of shapes, or for example, when they wanted to cut or they wanted to print, and they feel like they're falling apart, the pieces, they say, okay, how actually I can improve my design to be better in that area. I think as the program has running to be a digital part, is actually improve the logic and the thinking in the students to improve their design and be better and to wear the pieces for the person that is gonna be.
There's also less investment in like the material where you can continue modeling in 3D and you don't have to consume a lot of the metal. So that's also an advantage in the software.
In terms of sustainability and friendly to the environment, I think, yes, digital is, 3D modeling is definitely a good aid, not only in direct prototyping and production, but also in fabrication, which works very tightly with the hand skills that students are learning, right? If we can move on to another question. So now, what kind of future opportunities are you seeing with digital technology for education, particularly, not just the skills that we're teaching, but how we're teaching it in jewelry education, as well as for the industry at large, the jewelry industry at large? Because we've been talking more about digital technology applying to jewelry making and designing, and not as much as a tool for teaching in the classroom and outside of the classroom.
Well, certainly in terms of increased size of classrooms, for example, video technology which is digital, the ability to project video of demonstrations to students, so you can have a room of 60, 80 people, and then access to that video afterwards is certainly a big benefit of digital technology in the classroom. That sort of access, I guess, the access to, it's not like 10 years ago or 20 years ago where you'd have a small group of people around a demonstration bench, and if you couldn't see over someone's shoulder, then you had a hard time learning what was going on. And so certainly that has a big benefit, and that we're able to also sort of log a lot of these teaching tools.
And also, I think that offer a lot of choices for different learning styles as well for students. Anyone else?
No, I wanted to say that it's also, for example, for rendering and representation, it's a great tool, because now students who can't actually draw by hand will be able to make a great realistic renderings just by using the software we are teaching. And that's also, I think, it's a great advantage.
Yeah, it kind of levels the field in terms of professional presentation,
Exactly,
right?
yes, because not everybody can draw by hand, and this actually gives opportunity for people who can draw, bring their pieces into the real world and communicate in the right way, and being able to represent what they have in mind on the paper.
Yeah, and I think that expectation is there too, right? Like in terms of clients, that when you're out there as a jewelry designer and maker, the expectation of people is that you're going to produce beautiful photorealistic images of what this person is spending $5,000 or whatever for an engagement ring. They want to see, what does it really look like?
What they commit for.
Yeah,
Yes.
they don't want to see.
So you don't spend any money before the client commit to the design, and it makes it much easier and smoother process. They already know what to expect, right? The clients. When you can give them the renderings, the digital renderings, which looks very realistic. Many companies use it in their advertisement, and it's actually digital renderings and not real jewelry, which kind of a cheating in my way, but.
Well, and it's that whole thing kind of leads to the advantage of not having to keep an inventory.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes, let's make it. Yes.
Not having to spend all this money on having all this inventory of gold or platinum gemstone rings, but you have realistic renderings and photographs so that you can present the work without actually presenting physical work and investing all that money.
And in a way, eliminating a lot of processes and material in between, I would think as well. Like traditional casting, it takes wax to, you carve the wax, you make a mold out of plaster, right? And then it takes 7 to 10 hours of burning out in a kiln using energy. And then we have to use heat to melt the metal to throw it into the casting mold, right? And then finishing. If jewelry industry is heading direct printing in the direction of direct printing, then a lot of those processes and materials would be able to be eliminated in terms of usage. And also a lot of those materials are not necessarily that eco-friendly, right? So in terms of being sustainable and friendly to an environment and eliminating the process, I think that's also a great advantage of 3D printing, particularly in direct metal. Right. Any other additions? Should we open the floor for questions? Sure. I know it's very specific. We're talking about something that's very specific. There's a lot of sharp talk here. But if anyone wants some more clarification, a further inquiry, yes?
Is it possible for someone to take a photo of a ring that no longer exists and recreate it?
Yes, for sure. We can create very similar, very close to the picture, Yes, it's possible. As long as we have a picture from different views, so you have an idea how it looks from different views, then it's very possible, yeah.
Yeah, that sort of work has been going on, like with insurance companies. There's often jewelry insurance companies are also manufacturers. And they act because they're the ones who have initially required the photograph of the piece to insure it, and then it's recreated from a photograph in order to replace things that are stolen. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just curious for the instructors, where do you see the future of the education part of the digital sphere of technology going? Like, do you see that you could be able to teach online to people in smaller towns who don't necessarily have the funds to move to an expensive city and be able to teach them online how to like model and how to produce the jewelry?
I have a couple words about especially learning how to use 3D modeling software. There are lots of material available online, right? Like you can actually educate yourself. That's what happened to me. All I did, I took a 3-day course, and then I would educate myself by using resources online. So it is possible just to learn, yeah.
What I just wanted to say was I wanted to compliment you. I've seen the program over the past couple of years, and I think that you as instructors are artists, and I think that that is a valuable component more than just the technical abilities, but how do you teach people how to make art along with those technical skills?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah, sorry.
You go ahead.
I mean, there's no doubt in my mind, there's room and there's places to find where you can move some content online and you can reach a broader base of students internationally and who just simply can't come into a physical space. But there is really, it's not the kind of program that could ever go totally online, not at all. There's so much in our program already has to happen one-on-one, not even like 10-on-1. And even though, you know, we're in an environment where we're being asked to do 40-on-1, 50-on-1, 60-on-1, meaning one faculty member. But in order to bring the caliber high enough, like some of the images that you see up there of graduating students, they're in a program that's only 2 or 3 years long versus, you know, a European model of 7 years. So we're trying to do in 3 years what's done in 7 years traditionally in a German goldsmithing program. So that work, I really don't believe that work could happen if it wasn't for that one-on-one contact.
Surely skill, how to use the software, how to solder in some set situations, those could be documented in video and taught. But the finesse, working with the material, actually not so much about using the software, but how to design a functional piece of jewelry that's also aesthetically pleasing and have concept strong enough to exist. That, I think, takes the human contact, and it takes that coaching that we are not using in our existing or experiencing in our existing education system so far. Let's put it that way. I can't say about the future.
Yeah, nobody's figured out how to teach creativity online. It's hard enough to teach creativity in person.
Under my experience, I think is you need to touch the materials and you need to see how it works. Because even though if it's a sterling silver, is a steel, is gold, is copper, is brass, all of the materials, they works in totally different form. When are you gonna solder? When are you gonna cut it? When are you gonna bend it? So you can teach stuff from online, of course. Rhino, Illustrator, that is all of the tools, but you need a logic think to design pieces. That is something that I give you the school. when you process about, when you do that kind of process and design and make it and touch it and feel it and see it. All that alterations that you can make through when you go the process and develop your pieces, you only can see when you are approached with the material. It's totally fine to have videos. Right now we are in the area that you can YouTube everything, but it doesn't mean that you can make it. Sometimes you need the experience to do something. You need to experiment, you need to try, you need to fail. You need to do something with that material to see that it actually is working for the design that you're doing. So I feel like you can combine, but you need the present, to be present in that moment to make it. Because some of, for example, my pieces that I cut with laser cut, they give you in a rush piece, you need to finish in. No matter how, you need to be presentable. That is jewelry. It's present something that is perfect for point of view.
Any other questions from the audience? Very good. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you, panelists.
Thanks very much, everyone. Wing K, Paul, Lina, Valerie, and Korinna. Much appreciated.